Electrocast.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Western demands.
Now, this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or whatever movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host, Iris. Hey, Wes, do people ever call me names?
Oh, you mean like retard?
Yeah.
No.
Do we want an alternate introduction in case you don't want to include the R word in this recording?
We're directly quoting the movie in question today, which takes place, I think that exchange took place in 1969. We're being period accurate.
Oh, so in 1969, the R word was like in wide vernacular?
In our lifetime, in my lifetime anyway, it was not only 100% accepted, it was the preferred term. There were telethons and t-shirts in the telethon that it was called Help the Retarded.
It was the official accepted, maybe even like clinical term.
Correct.
So we went from retard to handicapped and then from handicapped to disabled?
There might have been other stuff in between there, but more or less. It all comes with the negative connotations that the mean people bring to the words, and then you just change out the words. They're just words. I'm not saying I stand by that word. I'm just saying that it's a word like anything else. The mental growth is retarded by whatever mitigating factors. It's like a fire retardant blanket. That's still fire retardant?
Yeah, I wouldn't keep that part at least. But now I think technically we are going with differently abled.
And give it another 10 years and that will be horrific to say. Iris, why are we talking about ZODIAC today? This is like our 9th David Fincher movie.
Though I'm resisting going zodiologist level deep, I have dabbled a little bit in this true crime space. It started with my review of the Clearing podcast, which is about a different serial killer, Ed Edwards. And in that, there's a conspiracy theorist, John Cameron, who believes that the serial killer Ed Edwards was actually the Zodiac or worked in tandem with the Zodiac, because there are very real overlaps between the two serial killers, not only in terms of the types of murders that they committed, but also their locations at the times of specific murders. And then I went on to Zodiac, and then I went on to This is the Zodiac Speaking, the Netflix documentary series about the Seawater family. Have you seen that?
Nope.
Whew. Yeah, you don't need to go down this rabbit hole. I have enough conspiracy theories in my head. I do think that there is real possibility that there was more than one Zodiac, and that brings me to the basement scene. Didn't Graysmith say, like under his breath, there's more than one killer or something to that effect in that scene?
It was speculated. Someone, I think, in Homicide had speculated that it was Arthur Lee Allen working in connection with Rick Marshall. And Rick Marshall is the one who led him down to the basement. And that's a weird, not real scene. Is there someone, there's obviously the noise to suggest someone, deliberate footsteps above, right? Creaky footsteps that someone above would know that the people below can hear. And then there was no one when Graysmith goes upstairs. Why would Rick Marshall volunteer? That's my handwriting, Mr. Graysmith. I do the posters myself. Why would he volunteer that information if he knows that he's after someone else, if he knows that he's on the trail of someone else? It was this ominous thing that was super in our face. Why would he do the, it's just down in the basement? And then Graysmith dumbly says, not many basements in California, which is, part of the police investigation. I do. And he went downstairs. There's the out of breath thing where he runs and pulls on the door, and Chuck is right behind him, Charles Fleischer, who plays Marshall. Is that scene supposed to be a manifestation of Graysmith's paranoia?
If so, Marshall was really feeding into it. I mean, he's acting really creepy in a way that suggests he's enjoying toying with scaring Graysmith. The moment he enters the house, I'm confirming he definitely took the key out of that lock, like Heretic. And then there's the other movie with the where the midget can't unlock the door.
Wow. Okay. Retard, we can get. Oh, actually, we could probably get away with midget too, contextually in 1969, but not now.
What movie? Where does he lock the door and then he can't get out?
What
It's
midget?
more recent. Oh, wait, Joker.
Oh.
Anyway, I definitely confirmed, like, okay, he's locking him in. He's not aware yet that he's, like, in big trouble, but I knew that was coming, and it just set the foundation for the terror of the entire scene.
The movie is constructed a lot like that, where it's a cold case that spans so many years. Very complicated. It's difficult, I think, to maintain tension for a movie that spans decades, right? You got to do the things, you got to use some of the tricks. It's a very dark movie, like actually dark. It's filtered down and it's all blue and green and depressed and Jokerish.
A lot of it takes place at night, and I don't think anyone can criticize Fincher's handling of the material. It seems very factually based. The locations are real, at least as I compared them to the real locations that are featured in the documentary. But his handling of the timeline is a little wonky. I'm very settled into this early 60s, 70s period and the Paul Avery, Robert Graysmith, even Tashi,
mispronounced throughout as Toschi, but this was actually the inspiration for George Lucas, who really took to this case and was like all into Dave Toschi as a detective and admired him, named Toschi Station on Tatooine after him.
No way. And is it true that Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry character was also based on this detective?
Dirty Harry, the very first movie, was based on it. That's the movie that they're watching when Graysmith meets Ruffalo for the first time, Toschi, for the first time in the lobby when he leaves kind of in disgust. I don't think he was called the Zodiac. He was called like the Scorpio Killer or something. But in the San Francisco area around that time. And then Clint Eastwood refused to let them use the footage from his movie on screen.
So Tashi, a very famous detective, I'm very invested in the early days of this case in the Fincher version. After that, everything else feels like the necessary additional exposition in order to get us to the end.
David Fincher knows the dark material, and this is the shining jewel that you put forefront in your in your Zodiac collection, right? If you have a glass case full of Zodiac related stuff and you have photocopies of the ciphers and stuff, you have the Zodiac DVD in the very front, right?
The movie that you've memorized and analyzed frame by frame.
And he was very thorough. I think they did 18 months, he and his team, of research before they put, a single frame of celluloid up. And he was, super diligent. He recreated the Berryessa Lake scene because it looked different. They helicoptered trees in and stuff to make it look right. Very authentic.
Whoa.
He didn't depict, this is noteworthy, I think, for the movie, maybe really telling. He didn't commit any of the murders, well, obviously, the ones that Zodiac committed. He didn't put any of those on film that didn't have survivors or witnesses. And he tried to minimize speculation, stick to the facts, keep it as reliable as possible, because otherwise, whoever, I forget who said it, this is serious. You're implicating this man as the Zodiac. And that's a serious thing. He wasn't being wild.
A man who was never convicted.
Right. David Fincher tried to treat it as respectfully and authentically as possible. Maybe not as a piece of the puzzle, as a clue. And yet the Zodiac, which was called inactive, the case was reopened after this movie, was actively being pursued, even though the prime suspect had been dead for 20 years.
Like in what jurisdiction, or all of them?
I'm not really sure because it does range. That's what Tashi pulled on Graysmith. He's like, why are you talking to me about that? That's Vallejo. That's not me. But he also knows all the information, obviously.
Right.
And that's kind of what this movie is a whole bunch of people disconnected until Graysmith assembles them like the Avengers, all working on their own thing and trying to help each other and stuff. And they all have their own problems. Robert Downey Jr. plays a Robert Downey Jr. type in his quick thinking snarkiness. And Mark Ruffalo plays a very Mark Ruffalo type, where he's all anxiety ridden and diligently pursuing this thing to an end to where he's all tired. And then Jake Gyllenhaal plays a Jake Gyllenhaal type, where he gets really dark, even with his little puppy dog eyes, and compromises his family and gets all tired looking and has like a beard and his hair is all lank and dirty and stuff.
Yeah, he's got the look. He's got the zodiologist look.
He's like a night crawler, and he's like mingling with serial killers.
Just minus the tick, yeah.
Yeah, but this was an Avengers movie. Basically, all three of these main stars having appeared in Marvel movies before the Avengers.
Gyllenhaal was a Marvel?
Jake Gyllenhaal was Mysterio in the Spider-Man movie.
He was also the Prince of Persia.
Don't talk about that. Nobody talks. That's like Green Lantern for Ryan Reynolds.
Nobody talks about Green Lantern?
No.
Jake Gyllenhaal was also Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, but look, that's the difference. There's the bubble boy, puppy dog, really sad, also kind of creepy Jake Gyllenhaal. And then there's the super buff, superhero, Roadhouse, Southpaw Jake Gyllenhaal. And never the twain shall meet.
What was that other Jake Gyllenhaal movie that was like the Tom Ford one where he was incredible?
Oh man, Nocturnal Animals. Kelly cringes when I say the name. And this actually stands out. You know what is forefront in my mind when Zodiac comes to mind? I was like, I got to revisit Zodiac because I'm not fresh on this. But it's fresh forever in Kelly Ray's mind as the worst serial killer movie, because this is the movie she points to when it comes to on-screen violence. It's not about the gore. It's not about the blood. It's the horribleness, the horrific acts depicted on screen. This is the movie where he stabs the girl at Berryessa Lake, and you can see the knife penetrating her body as he stabs her repeatedly, and she screams, tied up on the ground. That's what stuck with Kelly Ray. I didn't even consider asking her to revisit this movie with me.
What does this have to do with Nocturnal Animals?
Nocturnal Animals is also a movie that she finds gross and doesn't want to talk about or revisit.
Do you think there's something wrong with me that I'm a woman in your life that isn't bothered by this stuff?
No, because I'm not bothered by this stuff.
Amy can't watch this movie. Kelly doesn't want to watch this movie.
No, it's all about our upbringing, and Dad left us to our own devices. But serial killers, that's a huge thing. Like, people are enamored with serial killers. I think you can just handle it. Those images on screen don't bounce around in your head the same way they do for other people. And I'm the same way. I watched The Substance and I was like, there's nothing. Like, you can't touch this. And I was still affected by it because, we're human. But there's a fascination, especially with unsolved murders like this, the biggest unsolved murder in California history. No, there's a lot of room. You're not alone for sure. Although in the world of Zodiac, you might be alone when Graysmith goes all Jim Garrison from JFK and alienates his family and destroys his home life for this obsession for a decades old case.
Yeah, and he's still beating the Zodiac drum in the Netflix doc. And I think that this has become this is his platform. Although Zodiac the film and the filmmakers go to a length in the coda to say that Graysmith maintains a healthy relationship with his kids. They didn't necessarily mention his wife, but, he got it together at some point, maybe after he published the book. But these obsessions don't go away. I mean, this has captured the public's imagination for decades.
Zodiac is the most popular amateur book, the Graysmith book. And the obsession obviously doesn't end. Just because you put out the book, Tashi says, finish the book. And this will swing public opinion around to the police speculation that they can't pin down no reliable, tangible, credible evidence to convict Arthur Lee Allen. And yet everyone is like, it's so that dude. And he puts out the book, doesn't even name Allen in the book. Gives him a different name, something Star. And can't do anything about it, and thus it doesn't go away. Once you put the book out, it probably just intensified his obsession, right? Because people now fans are like, I have theories, and he probably sits down with those dudes in the original pantry coffee house or whatever and goes over all the stuff. And still to this day.
Which just closed down, by the way.
Yeah.
Did you know?
It's very sad.
130 years.
But maybe what's it called? The Bernie headquarters, the coffee shop there. Maybe they'll keep the facade around for use in movies because countless movies.
Anyway, I have a few Zodiac questions for you.
For me? Okay, hopefully they're about the movie. Go.
Paul Avery is the fast-talking, embellishing, what did you say, smarmy?
Yeah, snarky, self-destructive, too smart for his own good type.
Yeah, so is he the zodiologist, like cautionary tale, like a warning to Graysmith?
I think, was it Tashi that accused him of looking out for his headlines, that's really what he wanted? And he was the one who was watching the thing about the kids bouncing out of the school bus and the Zodiac picking them off. And he's like, fantastic. Like, holy cow, this is good media. He was like the first guy through the wall who always gets bloodied, right? He was too up in everyone's face and was never going to crack the case because he was more interested in his notoriety, in his headlines.
So he was frontline, to your point, but also he seemed to go downhill after he was directly contacted by Zodiac.
So to your point, in that way, in this movie, I think he was the cautionary tale of what could end up happening to Graysmith if he didn't shut up. Because Avery had kids in real life, if only briefly mentioned here, if at all. But this is what happens. When you get too close to the fire, you're going to get burned, and Graysmith has real potential. He gets the heavy breathing phone calls that could jeopardize. His wife was right to leave and take the kids to somewhere safe. To never come back after the book was released, I don't know about all that, but it's too much. And he's like, yeah, I found Darlene or whatever, and she's in prison. Isn't that great? And like, how is she supposed to react? She has no connection whatsoever. But he wasn't doing the healthy thing, that's for sure.
His life is in ruins by the last time we see him, and Graysmith regrets having gone to visit him. But aren't they all kind of just the grown-up version of the kids from Castle Rock? Like, aren't they all just looking for Ray Brower's? Aren't they all just looking for the body because they want to be famous?
Yes, they were. This is off the record, and I can't tell you, you can't help unless you talk to, what's his name, and go over here and call, but I didn't tell you that. It's all kind of secretive. They're restricted, ironically, by their profession and what they, disclosure and what they can and cannot say. But their enthusiasm, their obsession is super childlike. Yeah. By the end, they're so old looking and tired from decades of beating the bushes, The only thing that's driving them is this like childlike sort of curiosity, where you see the old gleam come back into Tashi's face when Graysmith is making all these connections.
That's such an important scene because not only does it revive and validate Tashi, but he's like all reinvigorated, and you can see how necessary this was for the Graysmith character. In addition to just wanting to be able to look the killer in the eyes, I think he needed to be validated by Tashi or by one of the investigators, because he needed that moment to feel like they were on equal ground and that he could actually contribute to this case, which leads me to my broadest question about the movie, which is, does the movie, Fincher's film, contribute to the discussion, the case? Does it move it forward in any way? I mean, maybe yes, it kind of brings it back into the public's consciousness like Graysmith's book did all those years ago. But does it actually contribute to the conversation? And was that part of the filmmaker's intention?
I do think Fincher's intention was to galvanize all the things. There's so much. What did Tashi say? 2,500 suspects. Alan was the only one who ever wrote him a letter. Decades. All evidence is circumstantial. But Graysmith's function in this movie and in writing the book is Nick Furying all these people and bringing the Avengers together so that they can be a stronger, unified force, present a stronger, more unified case, which is what he does. He distills decades of evidence, 2,500 suspects, into a book that you can fit dozens of them on a shelf and people can pick up at the airport. It is a re-examining, kind of like a Netflix documentary where you take all the stuff, the dozens of wacky characters in McMillions, and condense it into a story that connects them effectively and satisfyingly. It helps because he is being honest and true and laying the facts in front of people in a digestible way. It's like that one song you hear that evokes memories of a decade long gone by, where you're like, it takes you immediately back to that spot on the beach or whatever that you associate with that song. And the distinction between this and JFK, which I've referenced a couple of times now, is that Oliver Stone went a little bit nuts. He explored every theory, gave most of them equal weight in terms of credibility. And there's no possible way that everybody could have been involved that he speculated were involved and portrayed them on screen. But Zodiac sticks pretty closely to the facts, I think. And the facts all point to a dude, and he had to concede that there was no evidence actually connecting the dude, and maybe some stuff that even may have absolved him. But it doesn't matter because he's dead, which is all the more frustrating.
So the Zodiac film effectively brings together all the information that is viable, factual, verifiable, and presents it in not only a digestible way, but in a thrilling way and therefore in an entertaining way to further stoke the public's imagination and also to present and therefore reinforce what was Graysmith and Tashi's theory, or at least like their favorite suspect.
Right.
So to present that, I guess, is to maybe bring some closure to the public and for the conspiracy theorists to kind of stoke their fire. But I guess that's a pretty meaningful contribution, but they're all also in it to also put their names forward. You know, it was so ironic that the person who was seemingly least interested in the spotlight, Tashi, was the one who was accused of fabricating evidence in order to make a name for himself.
The charges of which he was absolved, but it lends to this larger picture of paranoia, of near hysteria, public hysteria that we were meant to think, is Tashi, who's so close? Is he so close because he could be the Zodiac? Graysmith doesn't seem to think so, but he doesn't have the best radar for when he's in a bad situation with someone or not. He's just kind of the headlong, headstrong kid, you know?
Sure, as Jake Gyllenhaal is good at portraying.
Yeah.
So did you say all the things you want to say about Zodiac?
No, well, just that this movie is not the textbook. This is not the feature doc that goes into all the facts and is super dry. This is Fincher, and he's wet and dirty and grimy, and he's got style, and he really puts us in these intimate bubble situations for the murders that makes them horrifying. And yet they think they're safe in their lover's lane bubble or on the lakeside where nothing bad could ever happen. And then he bursts those bubbles because they were in the serial killer bubble instead. Like stylistically, it evokes, I think, a time, you know, a place with the music, with the imagery. San Francisco is a very specific looking kind of thing. And we bounce all around town and stuff. And then it becomes the Graysmith show, but this is not Graysmith's Zodiac pointing a finger directly. This is just suggesting all this evidence is compiled, but it wasn't his thing. And what about this DNA evidence later on that would have exonerated him? You know, David Fincher had 3 dudes play the killer throughout this movie.
I was wondering about that.
You can't pin down exactly. You're not suggesting it wasn't John Carroll Lynch, also kind of a serial killer name, who I really like. In the thing, he wasn't the one killing those people on film because he wasn't pointing a specific finger. He didn't want us to identify. He didn't want the Zodiac to be played by a readily identifiable major star, a la John Doe and Seven. You know, part of which the 7 Deadly Sins killer or whatever was Zodiac based, a strong viewpoint from David Fincher, and he's really good at conveying that viewpoint in a way that we can understand. Like you said, to be entertained, sure. But I did like this idea of fear of the unknown and hysteria and the frustration of carrying this case for so many years without a satisfactory resolve.
Yeah.
It seems to me like David Fincher, I think he's a restless dude. He's probably got a mansion, but he probably paces back and forth in that mansion all day long and has murder rooms where he has bulletin boards with pictures and red thread connecting them and stuff.
Well, you can see the through line in his filmmaking. Even Social Network, our discussion for which is at orwhatevermovies.com, wherever you get podcasts, is played like a horror film.
And that's the key.
Or a thriller.
Graysmith also sees the through line. He sees the glowing connecting thread between all of these various aspects, And it just is clear to him in the same way I assume it is for Fincher, who took an awful lot of time and he was way out there in the weeds. And to bring it around in a movie that promotes the public interest again so much that they officially reopen the case.
It's weird to think about this film on its different levels, on the level of the factual level, historical level of the case, the filmmaking level, and then also from a Fincher layer or perspective. There's a lot going on here, and it's very dense, too.
Why isn't this forefront for Fincher's body of work? I'm going with, most of the other stuff had a fairly satisfactory resolve. This is certainly not his first movie that ends with cards, detailed cards. Zodiac doesn't have the satisfaction that comes with it. It actually leaves you with more of a feeling of dread, I think, than anything. Just that he was never caught. And he's like Jack the Ripper. And it leads to this continued interest, obsession, but doesn't provide answers.
Maybe it's because this is so real and unsettling. Frankly, the murder scenes are my least favorite in this film.
You think?
I could kind of do without them, and reviewing the film for the purposes of discussion. When we decided to discuss it, I skipped over them because the case is the story. And it is a little bit of a wonder why this isn't one of the films that Fincher is best known for. It's a stellar cast.
Oh, the supporting cast is through the roof.
It's insane. Yes, both lead and supporting. It is a well-researched, super dense, presentation of information. There's nothing to pick apart in terms of its execution. And he's no stranger to tackling big subjects. I mean, Facebook, and what he did in the Social Network. Would you say he's best known for the Social Network?
I don't know. Maybe Seven, maybe Social Network, but he keeps going. We haven't seen the last of Fincher. It's probably not Mank.
It's probably not Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Yeah, this is just a big, solid, reliable boulder at the base of his David Fincher cairn, the ominous cairn that is his body of work.
And on that note, your rating is?
I'm going to give it a quirky. This is the Animal Crackers of David Fincher movies. I don't know. It's very careful, methodical. It's procedural. It's dark. It's interested and well executed. The speculation is kept to a minimum, and yet this movie is entirely speculative. I have revisited it a number of times just for sheer style of the storytelling and for an interesting story. Can't help it. It's not his best, but certainly not his worst. I think this movie kind of defies rating, because if you love it, you're probably a weirdo, but you can admire it from almost any other angle.
And I'm definitely an admirer, and that's our discussion on Zodiac, a film from 1997 and by David Fincher and company. What did you think of Zodiac? Have you checked out our other discussions on David Fincher films at orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts? Let us know, 818-835-0473 or whatevermovies@gmail.com. We love to hear from you, and we hope that you enjoy these favorites discussions, because we just love movies, as easy as that sounds, and we think you do too. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Electricast.